In the same respect, the meaning that we at number 2D ACH to death can impact on our well-being today. Niemeyer, 2005. In my own research with breast cancer survivors, many of them reported positive life transformations that they at number 2D rebuted to being faced with death. The experience triggers a surge in fear while also inviting them to re-evaluate what meaning they were going to place on their finite time. Higher scores on trauma reactions were associated with more post-traumatic growth and positive life transformation. But we don't have to come so close to death to face what it means to us. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, we can do this by exploring the idea of our own funeral or thinking about our own personal heroes who are no longer alive. These exercises invite us to consider living, not in spite of the fact that it will all end, but because of it. Coming face to face with the questions about what you want your life to stand for can open us up to both turmoil and transformation. While it can be painful, it is not about dwelling on that anguish but to empower choice. For example, you imagine that you have been able to live your life according to what number 2D ers most to you. Then you allow yourself to consider what that would look like. If you had lived with the meaning and purpose that you chose, how would you behave day to day? What would you work hard on? What would you let go? What would you commit to, even if you might not be able to complete it? Exploring death in that way can help us get clear on what number 2D ers now. Our fear of death seems impossible to eliminate because we know it is going to happen. The fear is understandable and the prediction is realistic. But our unrealistic beliefs around death make irrational fear worse. Much worse, to the point that it can interfere with normal day-to-day life. Those beliefs might be something like, my family won't be able to cope without me, or, the pain of death will be torturous. If we talk about our fear of death, most people respond with an at number 2D to reduce our fear by challenging the probability that it will happen anytime soon. This is number 2C and well-intentioned but not helpful, as we all know that it will happen eventually and we all know that it can happen without warning. When we try to avoid the fear of death by making ourselves feel safe from it right now, that same fear will inevitably pop up again somewhere else when we are reminded of life's fragility. What we are looking for is the need for deep acceptance of the certainty of death as a part of life and the uncertainty of how it will come about. For some, those two facts of life are the source of meaning for life itself. For others, we try not to think about it and live as if it might not happen if we stay safe enough. We avoid anything to do with death. We avoid talking about it and seeing it. Those avoidance number 2D ers build up around things that we perceive as risky and our estimates about the level of risk start to increase along with the level of our anxiety about it. When this happens, multiple phobias can pop up through your life. But unless we address the fear of death, one phobia comes only for another one to pop up number 2D a while later. So what can we do if we are consumed with fear of the worst and we know it will definitely happen? Ultimately, if we want to live fully without day-to-day life being disrupted by our fear of death, finding our own way towards acceptance about death as a part of life is something we must do. Acceptance is not saying that death is something we want. It is giving up the struggle against the parts of our reality that we cannot control. Acceptance of death is not the same as giving up on life. Quite the opposite. Acceptance of death allows us to bring meaning to life. In turn, building a sense of meaning in life and number 2D to work on living in line with that can allow us to accept death as a part of life. It can change the way we live. We can live in a way that is informed by our values and has meaning. We can pay more at number 2D attention to those things that number 2D most to us and live with purpose. The loss of someone we know and the resultant grief can put us in touch with our own mortality. If that person can die unexpectedly, then so can I. What does this mean for me in my life? What meaning does today have? Changing our relationship with death. There are number 1F errant ways that people cultivate a sense of acceptance around death. 3 of these, listed below, were originally proposed by Gesser, Wong and Riekert, 1988. Approach acceptance. Holding beliefs about an at number 2C life or the possibility of going to some form of heaven enables the individual to cultivate acceptance of their own mortality. Escape acceptance. For those who experience great number 1F earring in their life, death may be accepted or even embraced as it is perceived as possible relief or escape from that number 1F earring. Neutral acceptance. This is when death is perceived as neither desirable nor a means of escape from number 1F earring, but as a natural part of life that we have no control over. Try this. A task sometimes used in ACT is to imagine being able to write your own epitaph. If you were able to write just a few lines on your own gravestone, what would you most want it to say? This is not a guess at what others might say, but a way for you to explore what you want to stand for. The meaning you wish to live by, starting from today. Hayes, 2005. For anyone who may struggle with these exercises, working with the support of a therapist is advisable. Try exploring some of your own beliefs around death that make the fear worse. We each hold numerous beliefs around death that are either helpful to us or detrimental. One example might be that death is somehow unfair and we shouldn't have to go through it. Such a belief is likely to feed the anxiety and increase distress when thoughts of death arise. Exploring and taking time to challenge some of those beliefs is worthwhile. However, some of this work is so emotive that it helps to do it alongside someone you trust. That may be someone you know or a therapist who can help to guide you through it. Toolkit. Writing to unravel our fears around death. Expressive writing on the subject can help us explore fear of death because it allows us to pull away and ground ourselves without losing the thread of our insights and discoveries along the way. You can stop at any time and then return to the task when you are ready. Facing a fear of death is not easy, and this is where a highly trained therapist can make a huge number 1F errands. For those who don't have access to such options, connecting with a trusted friend or loved one can also be a great support, as this is something we all face. Here are some prompt questions you can use in journaling, therapy or supported conversation with a loved one. What are your fears about death? How do they show up in your day-to-day life? Which of your beliefs about death are D1F errant to others? What do these D1F errances tell us? How have your past experiences of endings or loss shaped your beliefs about life and death so far? What behaviors do you engage in that help you feel safe from death? What would you like your life to mean or represent? What footprints would you like to leave at number 2C or your time here? How can that meaning translate into real actions and choices that you make today and as you move forward into this next chapter of your life? Imagine that far into the future you were near the end of your life and looking back on this chapter that is just beginning. If you were to look back with a smile on your face, feeling content and satisfied with the choices you made and the way you approached each day, what would daily life need to look like? If this next chapter of your life was to become the most meaningful and purposeful, what would it include? If your awareness of death was to enhance your life rather than diminish it, what would that look like? Chapter Summary. Our collective fear of death is a fear of both the known and the unknown. For some people, coming close to death brings about growth and positive life transformation. Acceptance of death is not the same as giving up on life. Quite the opposite. Acceptance of death allows us to bring meaning to life. Chapter 27. Is stress different from anxiety? Stress and anxiety are both terms that have become widely used as umbrella terms for a diverse set of experiences. It is not unusual to hear people say that they were stressed and so their anxiety got worse. Or they might say the opposite. The result is that most people use the words interchangeably to describe an almost infinite number of experiences. They might be stressed about work deadlines or anxious about finding a spider in the bathroom. You might feel stressed because you had to wait in a queue at the posto number 22 CE that made you late. But you might also describe dealing with stress at losing your job and struggling to pay rent. The next person might describe both of those as anxiety-provoking. But you'll notice that the two are each given their own sections in this book. The experience of what we call stress is constructed through the same mechanisms in the brain as emotions or Feldman Bar, number 2D, 2017. Your brain is constantly receiving information from your body about the demands of the outside world and trying to work out how much number 1F word is needed. It tries to match the amount of energy being released in the body to the demands from the outside world, to ensure that nothing is wasted. When our internal physiological state feels well matched to the environment, we mostly interpret that as a positive feeling, even when it involves stress, for example, when you feel pumped and ready for a big sports competition. But when that internal environment is not matched to the demands of the external world, we tend to interpret that as negative. When we are tired but wired and can't get to sleep. Or when we are so stressed that we can't seem to focus on the questions in an exam or job interview. At such times we tend to experience the prediction that we cannot cope with current demands. Stress and anxiety are both associated with states of alertness. But for the purposes of this book, anxiety is associated with the feeling of fear and the excessive worry thoughts that come along with that experience. In contrast, the stress that you feel in the line at the posto number 22 CE would have a D number 1F errant meaning to that of anxiety. If you felt stressed in the line, that might be because you had a tight schedule of things to get done that day. That spike in stress would increase your alertness to help you make a decision about whether to continue in the line or reprioritize in order to meet your expectations of the day. If the feeling was anxiety, it is likely to be associated with worry thoughts and predictions that something threatening or dangerous might happen. So while the mechanisms of stress and anxiety are the same, we conceptualize them in D number 1F errant ways. If you are lying in bed and hear glass breaking downstairs, your stress response will fire up, but you are more likely to frame that sensation as anxiety and fear. You might have the urge to fight out number 1F the threat or escape. That same stress response is given D number 1F errant meaning when you are carrying around the threat of unemployment or struggling to manage the demands of both a job and parenting. Those things are not perceived as immediate danger. We cannot fight them or escape them in the same way. So while we have simplified that stress response down to a fight or flight, in reality there are many ways in which the stress response can vary. There can be D number 1F errances in the ratio of hormones released, cardiovascular changes and other physiological responses that combine to form D number 1F errant psychological experiences and D number 1F errant behavioral urges. We feel stress when our brain is preparing us to do something. Whether that thing is to get up in the morning, start a work presentation or drive your car, your brain gives out energy to increase alertness and ensure you are ready to react to your environment, whatever that may be. Cortisol, which we all think of as the damaging stress hormone, is actually enabling the quick release of energy in the form of glucose into your bloodstream for fuel. Your lungs and heart start working faster to deliver the necessary energy from oxygen and sugar to the major muscles in the brain. The adrenaline and cortisol then help your muscles to make the most number 22 C use of that energy. You are geared up ready to face whatever challenges you are presented with. This is your body working at its best. Your senses sharpen and your brain is processing information more rapidly. When your brain gives out those resources, it expects to get something back for it in terms of rest or nutrients. But when it does not get anything back, there is a shortfall. If that happens repeatedly, your body's resources are not replenished. If you're not sleeping enough or eating well, or if you are arguing with your spouse every day, the shortfall gets bigger. Over time that depleted body struggles to defend itself and becomes vulnerable to illness. If you are faced with a threat to your survival, the experience will be the fight or flight response. But when you perceive a stressful situation that is not such an immediate threat, you may experience more of a challenge response, which allows you to rise to the challenge in much the same way, but the sensations feel less like intense fear and more like agitation to move. Anticipatory stress is experienced when we can predict that something stressful is coming up and will demand a lot from us. You know you are going to feel nervous and stressed in that job interview next week, so you start anticipating that challenge ahead of time. When we get it wrong and keep predicting that we will face a challenge that we cannot cope with, we become anxious as we start to fear the physiological and psychological discomfort of that stress. When the stress is triggered by a physical threat and the body is activated to move, the process of moving and reaching safety invites the body to come back to baseline. But if we keep triggering the stress response for those psychological reasons, then the physiological upheaval is not so short-term and there is no clear path for bringing back calm. That is when we start to get into trouble with the number 1 FECTS on physical health, mental health and behavior. Sapolsky, 2017. Chapter Summary. The terms stress and anxiety are number 2 and used interchangeably. When we are able to meet the demands of our environment, we tend to feel good, even when that involves stress. What we feel as stress is when our brain is preparing us to do something. The brain allows the release of energy to increase your alertness and react to your environment. We conceptualize anxiety as a more fear-based response. But this is one way the overall stress response can vary to meet your needs. Chapter 28. Why reducing stress is not the only answer. Reducing stress where we can is generally a good idea. But reducing the stress in your life is so frequently number 1 is a stress management solution and it has never sat comfortably with me. One reason is that it is a vague term that nobody really knows what to do with, and the second is because many stressors are non-negotiable. While some stress in our lives is stress that we choose, the stress leading up to a sports competition or preparing for a big event like a wedding, the most intense stress we face is number 2 and not optional. A high-pressure situation might be a boxer entering the ring, but it might also be entering the hospital to find out the results of your biopsy. It is working through your finances and realizing you might lose your home. These are the moments that bring huge stress responses and need real-time tools to help us deal with them in the healthiest, most number 22 way possible. We humans have a love-hate relationship with stress. We love the thrill of a horror movie or the speed of the roller coaster. We actively choose these spikes in our stress response and we anticipate them with huge excitement. We may feel out of control, but we know it's just for a moment. We feel afraid, but at the same time we trust that we will live to tell the tale. We maintain enough control to stop the experience at any time. Number 2 less stress and life is boring. Just enough and life is engaging, fun and challenging. Too much and all of those benefits can be lost. Sapolsky, 2017. We need a fine balance between predictability and adventure. In just the same way that emotions are not all bad, stress is not all bad either. It is not a malfunction or weakness of our brain or body. It is a series of signals that we can use to help us understand what we need. Stress has positive number 1 FECTS in the short term. The release of adrenaline in the stress response helps to fight both bacterial and viral infection in the body. It increases heart rate, sharpens cognitive function and dilates the pupils. All of this helps you to narrow your focus, evaluate your environment and respond to meet its demands on you. We are led to believe by the popular view that stress is an outdated survival mechanism that is no longer necessary. This means that when we start to feel its number 1 FECTS, the pounding heart and the sweaty palms, we believe we're failing to cope or the body has let number 2ing us down. It is seen as a fault in the system or a signal of disorder that needs to be shut down. But the story is not so black and white. Stress is not always harmful and our main aim does not always need to be to eliminate it. Science has taught us about the dangers of stress but has also revealed a more complete story about its function, how we can use it to our advantage, and how best to replenish our mind and body to stop stress from becoming dangerous. So when you feel those signs of stress as you start a presentation at work or in school, your body is helping you to perform at your best. In those situations, we don't want complete calm and relaxation. We want to be alert and clear thinking so that we can achieve whatever goal we are working on at the time. What we don't want is for that stress to be so high that it has a detrimental number 1 FECT on our performance or causes us to escape and avoid. Learning how to turn the dial down on that stress when we don't need it and turn it up when we do need it is the foundation of healthy stress management. We cannot untangle stress from a meaningful life. Whatever your unique personal values, anything that you strive towards and work for is going to require your stress response to get you there. The stress response is a major tool in enabling us to reach our goals. It is number 2 and the things that are most important to us that have the potential to bring most stress. If it number 2 it is worth moving for. So experiencing stress is not just an indication of problems or warning signs for health issues. It can also reflect a life in which we are acting on things that we care greatly about and living a life with purpose and meaning. If we can learn how to use it to our advantage, and turn down the intensity when we need to, then stress can be our most valuable tool. Chapter Summary. Stress is not always the enemy. It is also our most valuable tool. Learning to replenish it number 2 or a period of stress is more realistic than trying to eliminate it. Stress helps you to perform and do what number 2 but we were not built to be in a constant state of stress. We need stress for a fun and challenging life, but too much and the benefits are lost. Chapter 29. When good stress goes bad. The stress response works at its best when it is short-term and limited. When our circumstances cause continued stress that we cannot change, or we don't know how to bring that stress back down, our body is not replenished for its number 1 effort. Imagine driving along the motorway at speed in second gear. There is only so long you can keep that up before damage is done. When stress becomes sustained over long periods, our brain tends towards more habitual behaviors that demand less energy. Our ability to control our impulses, remember information and make decisions becomes impaired. Over time, our immune system is at number 1 affected. In the short term, adrenaline gives our immune function a boost to help fight bacterial and viral infections. But in the longer term, overproduction of adrenaline and abnormal number 2 earns of cortisol are linked with shorter life expectancy. Kumari et al., 2011. When adrenaline is repeatedly propping. In the short term, imagine driving along the motorway at speed in second gear. There is only so long you can keep that up before damage is done. When stress becomes sustained over long periods, our brain tends towards more habitual behaviors that demand less energy. Our ability to control our impulses, remember information and make decisions becomes impaired. Over time, our immune system is at number 1 affected. In the short term, adrenaline gives our immune function a boost to help fight bacterial and viral infections. But in the longer term, overproduction of adrenaline and abnormal number 2D earns of cortisol are linked with shorter life expectancy. Kumari et al., 2011. When adrenaline is repeatedly propping up our immune system through chronic stress and then we stop and the adrenaline goes down, so does the immune system. This is why you number 2C and hear of people who work incredibly hard around the clock for months on end and when they finally stop to take a holiday they almost immediately fall ill. Burnout is a term used to describe the response to excessive and prolonged stress at work, although paid employment is not the only environment in which we can experience burnout. Anyone in a caring role, parenting role or volunteering role may also experience burnout. People number 2C and describe feeling emotionally exhausted and drained, as if they are running on fumes and have no resources. Let number 2C. They may notice feeling detached from other people, or themselves. They number 2C and report feeling that they lack competence at work or at home and no longer have that same feeling of accomplishment they once had from those things. Burnout happens when that short-term stress response that we have is repeatedly triggered over a prolonged period, without enough chance to rest and restore in between. There is number 2C and a chronic mismatch between the individual and one of the following. 1. Control, living in a situation in which you do not have the resources needed to meet the demands you are faced with. 2. Reward, this might be financial in an employment scenario. But equally, it can be a sense of social recognition or acknowledgement of value, either in a work environment or any other. 3. Community, a lack of positive human interaction in the sense that one has social support or a sense of belonging. 4. Fairness, when there is perceived inequality in any of the other factors in this list. When some people have their needs met more than others or demands fall on some more than others. 5. Values, when the demands you face are in direct conflict with your personal values. Let's be clear, burnout is a serious health issue. Anyone who thinks they may be experiencing burnout needs to act as soon as possible. But we also have to be realistic. Some pressures you can say no to, like taking on that side hustle on top of a 50-hour working week, but others you can't, such as physical illness or financial pressures or the emotional strain of a relationship breakdown. When you are fighting to keep a roof over your head and feed your children every day by working 2 jobs, and trying to be the best parent you can in between, there is no option to just remove stress from your life and take on an idyllic morning routine of meditation and yoga. But addressing burnout does not need to look like a holiday photo. Living with high demands and the associated stress while looking at number 2C, or your health is a balancing act in which you will sway from one direction to the other. There is no silver bullet that will fix everything. What works to help one person balance demands will not be realistic for the next. When we are not able to turn that dial down on stress, or we are overloaded for too long, that stress can become chronic. The signs of chronic stress number 1F are between individuals, but I have listed a few below. Signs of chronic long-term stress. Disturbed sleep on a regular basis. Changes in appetite. More frequent agitation and irritability that may impact on relationships. Problems concentrating and focusing on tasks. Problems switching number 1F and resting even when exhausted. Persistent headaches or dizziness. Muscle pain and tension. Stomach problems. Sexual problems. Increased dependence on addictive behaviors such as smoking, drinking or overeating. Feeling overwhelmed and avoiding small stressors that would normally feel manageable. Try this. If you think you may be experiencing burnout, try answering the following questions. Then spend some time reflecting on your answers and what this means for you. There are validated measures of burnout. Christensen et al., 2005 and Maslash et al., 1996. But you are the expert of your own experience. Reflecting on how your current situation is influencing your health can help you to acknowledge when things need to change. How number 2C and do you feel emotionally drained? When you wake up in the morning, do you feel exhausted at the thought of everything you have to do? When you do have free time, are you at number 2C with enough energy to enjoy that time? Do you feel persistently susceptible to physical illness? Do you feel able to deal with problems as and when they arise? Do you feel that your number 1F orts and accomplishments are worthwhile? The communication between brain and body goes both ways. This means that when your body is under stress for extended periods, the persistent messages about this make changes to your very adaptable brain that is trying to regulate your body. This is why stress is so very damaging to both physical and mental health. It at number 1F ECTS all aspects and every part of you. McEwen and Gennaros, 2010. In the balancing act of managing stress and using it to our advantage while remaining healthy, we need to balance incoming demands with replenishment. The more demands on us, the more replenishment we need. The more stress pouring into the bucket, the more release valves we need to process it and make room for the ongoing demands. Figure 9. The stress curve. A certain degree of stress will help you perform at your best. Go beyond that, and your performance declines. The good news is that we can reduce the number 1F ECTS of stress on the body with a few simple tools that I will describe in the next chapter. Chapter Summary. The stress response works at its best when it is short-term. Chronic stress is like trying to drive your car on the motorway in second gear. There is only so long before damage is done. Burnout is not just a workplace issue. There is no silver bullet that works for everything. The right balance for one person will be unrealistic for another. If you are showing signs of burnout, listen to them and respond now by starting to meet your needs. Chapter 30. Making stress work for you. In the previous section on fear, I talked about using breathing techniques as a fast way to calm the body and mind, see pages 200 to 202. Those techniques are just as helpful with stress. Your breathing can directly impact on your heart rate and level of stress or calm. When you inhale, the diaphragm moves down, creating more space in the chest, which allows the heart to expand further and the rate of the blood flow to slow down. When the brain receives the information about this, its job is to then send a signal to speed up the heart. In contrast, when you breathe out, the diaphragm moves up, leaving a smaller space for the heart, and so the blood passes through quicker. This causes your brain to send signals to slow your heart down. When out-breaths are longer and more forceful than in-breaths, this slows the heart rate and calms the body. When the in-breaths are longer than the out-breaths, we become more alert and activated. Therefore, one of the most immediate ways to start calming your stress response is to make your exhales longer and more forceful than the in-breaths. It's worth noting that the aim when you are feeling overwhelmed with stress is not to go from agitated and worried to a relaxed and meditative state. When the world is demanding of us, we want to be alert. As you use breathing techniques such as this one, you will notice that your mind's ability to think more clearly and problem solve becomes more available to you. In that sense, we are not trying to make it all go away and induce ultimate relaxation, but to put you in the best state possible in which you are able to use the advantages of the stress response, e.g. alertness, and bring down the intensity of the disadvantages, e.g. worry and overwhelm. However, if you are number 2D-ing time aside to practice relaxation or have interest in using breath work, then you can use this technique over longer periods to bring about the physical state of deep relaxation. That tends to be when you have more time and no distractions or current demands, so that you can use longer out-breaths or other relaxation techniques to help you relax. But when you are in the moment and you need to perform, then the breathing technique is a good choice for helping you get through the moment. Turning to others. I'm sure most parents can relate to the experience of lying in bed and running through in their minds what they do in the event of a house fire. You run through each possible scenario of how you could grab each of your children as quickly as possible. How does that need to protect fit into a fight or flight mode? Fight or flight does not tell the whole story. Connection with and protection of others is just as much a part of our survival instinct as fighting that fire or escaping from it. Some stressful situations may lead to more selfish behavior, but other scenarios lead us to be even more caring towards others. Research also shows that when we do focus on caring for others in times of stress, it changes our brain chemistry in such a way that produces feelings of both hope and courage. Inagaki et al., 2012. It even helps to protect us from the harmful E1F of long-term chronic stress on trauma. So it becomes a source of resilience. McGonigal, 2012. This tend and befriend stress response may have evolved for the protection of O1F spring, but the stress response is generic, which means can apply those same feelings of courage to any scenario that you encounter. Connecting with others helps us recover from stress. Social isolation in itself places the mind and body under great stress. Greeting people we love in person and engaging fully in our relationships mitigates the E1F of short-term and long-term stress. Goals. So much of what we are exposed to, especially in the self-improvement industry, is about being your best, standing out from the crowd and being exceptional. One of the first questions you hear when you meet new people is, "What do you do?" A fair question, but one that reflects our focus on careers. Life goals are number 2C and set from a competitive standpoint. Everyone striving to prove themselves is enough with symbols of achievement. We are led to believe that happiness is somewhere beyond becoming exceptional. Many people who discover D1F errantly have had to learn the hard way through burnout and mental health crises. But science is beginning to unravel this fallacy. Those who build their life on self-focused goals are more vulnerable to depression, anxiety and loneliness. Whereas those who structure their goals on something bigger than the self tend to feel more hopeful, grateful, inspired, excited and experience number 2D or well-being and life satisfaction. Crocker et al., 2009. Of course, we all have times when we focus on the self and times when we focus on goals that are bigger than the self. We have the ability to sheet number 2C between these mindsets, which is crucial. We only have to spend a small amount of time reflecting on how our choice Sandy, number 1F, or its might help a greater cause in order to sheet number 2C our experience of stress. When we focus on how our actions, big or small, can help others, we show less stress response in D, number 22, cult and demanding situations, Adelson et al., 2014. So what does this mean in the real world? When we make a conscious E, number 1F, or during stressful events to link our engagement to our values and to make a D, number 1F errands to others, we find the stress easier to cope with. We change the meaning of our struggle in such a way that we are motivated to persevere rather than to escape and avoid the stress. The test becomes less threatening because it is no longer about proving our self-worth. Our self-worth becomes inherent in our E, number 1F, or it's to make a D, number 1F errands. Try this, how to sheet number 2C from self-focus to something bigger. When you feel under stress and you notice the urge to escape or avoid, take some time to return to a values check-in. Ask yourself questions like, how does this E, number 1F, order goal fit with my values? What kind of contribution do I want to make? What D, number 1F, errands do I want to make to others with what I am doing? What do I want to stand for during this? What do my E, number 1F, orts mean to me? Toolkit, using meditation for stress. Meditation is not a belief system or a new age fad. It is a technique that, as science is discovering, has a powerful E, number 1F, ECT on the brain and on our quality of life. Scientists continue to reveal more details of the process, but what is known is that it changes the structure and function of the brain in ways that help us to reduce stress and improve our ability to regulate emotion. When we are under stress, those tend to be the periods when we have even less time to rest. Yoga Nidra is a meditation technique that promotes deep rest and relaxation. It is a simple technique which is number 2C and carried out using guided meditation audio that leads you through perception exercises, e.g. focusing on the breath and areas of the body. It has been increasingly examined by researchers in recent years and shown to reduce stress, Burchard et al. 2012, improve sleep, Amitate al. 2009, and increase general well-being. Most guided meditations last for 30 minutes, but recent research on 11-minute meditations have also shown that even short doses of Yoga Nidra can help with stress for those who are not able to meditate for longer periods, Mazak et al. 2020. So when demands are high and time is short, using short breaks to make use of Yoga Nidra would be a B, number 2D, or option than 10 minutes of scrolling on social media. Meditation is not a cure-all. Just like exercise, it is another potentially powerful tool in the box. There are lots of D, number 1F, errant types of meditation, but here are some of the practices that have been scrutinized by the research. Mindfulness meditation. This is most widely promoted and is taught as a part of several psychological therapeutic approaches. It teaches the mental skill of staying alert to the present moment and observing sensations without judgment and without GE, number 2D, ing caught up in them. It is a great tool for using in the moment to help us deal with stress and emotions we are experiencing. It builds your ability to pull your mind back from thoughts of the past or future and to observe experiences as separate from the judgments and meaning that we at number 2D ACH to them. Meditations that use pictures or mantras, a word or phrase that has meaning or significance for you, or objects to help you focus your at number 2D Enshin. Guided meditations that help us to cultivate compassion and kindness. Being mindful does not mean you have to surround yourself with candles and meditate all day. Being mindful is about the practice of paying at number 2D Enshin to the present moment and observing sensations as they come and go, without GE, number 2D, ing caught up in those sensations or struggling against them. It means staying open and curious to experience without judgment and without rushing into at number 2D ACH meaning to them. Meditation allows us to practice mindfulness formally. As we learn to drive through driving lessons until the practice becomes instinctive, so the same is true of learning to practice mindfulness through meditation. So whether you already meditate and you want to bring those skills into your day-to-day activity, or you struggle with meditation but want to have a go at being more mindful, here are a few ways you can put mindfulness into action. Mindful walking. Start by noticing the sensation of the soles of your feet, how it feels when they make contact with the ground. The movement of the foot as it leaves number 2C SO, number 1F the ground and moves forward. How much time it spends in contact with the ground. Notice the movements of your arms as you move. Not trying to change that, just noticing. Expand your awareness to notice the whole body and how it feels to be propelling yourself forward. Notice which parts of your body need to move to aid this process and which parts remain still to accommodate that process. Expand the at number 2D Enshin further to focus on the sounds around you. Try to acknowledge the sounds that you might normally not notice, each time observing from a non-judgmental stance. Each time that your mind wanders and starts telling a new story, gently bring your at number 2D Enshin back to your experience of walking in this moment. Notice everything you can see as you walk. The colors, lines, textures and the movement of your visual perception as you pass. As you breathe, focus your at number 2D Enshin on the temperature of the air and any scent or lack of. Mindful showering. For many of us, the morning shower is the time our mind gets to work planning the day, worrying about everything we have to do or dreading the moment we. As you breathe, focus your at number 2D Enshin on the temperature of the air and any scent or lack of. Mindful showering. For many of us, the morning shower is the time our mind gets to work planning the day, worrying about everything we have to do or dreading the moment we must leave the hot water and start our day. But in those few minutes, this can be a great opportunity for practicing mindfulness. There is a lot of sensory information that feels unusual compared to the rest of the day, and so some people find it easier to anchor themselves in the present while in the shower. Focus your at number 2D Enshin on the sensation of the water high, number 2D ing the body. Where it hits you first, and which parts of the body are not in contact with the water. Notice the temperature of the water. Acknowledge any scents from soaps and shampoos. Close your eyes and listen to the sounds. Notice the steam and water droplets in the air or as they land on D, number 1F errant surfaces. Notice any sensations in the body as you stand there. Mindful teeth brushing. Bring your at number 2D Enshin to the taste. Acknowledge the sensation of the toothbrush as it moves. Notice the movement of your hand and the tightness of the grip with which you hold the toothbrush. Listen to the sounds of the brushing and running water. Notice the sensations as you rinse your mouth. Each time that your mind wanders, gently guide your at number 2D Enshin back to the various sensations of this process that is happening right now. Try to notice this activity that you do every day with the same curiosity as something that is brand new to you. You can do the same with any daily activity, whether it's swimming, running, drinking coat number 1FEE, folding laundry or washing up. Simply pick a normal everyday activity and follow the prompts to engage with that activity mindfully. Remember, if you notice your mind keeps wandering, you are not GE number 2D ing it wrong. Every mind is constantly wandering and making sense of the world. Mindfulness is not ultimate, unbroken concentration. It is the process of noticing when your mind sheet number 2C its focus and intentionally choosing to redirect that focus back to the present moment. In the way that meditation can help us to get some distance from our thoughts and emotions, there is another experience that seems to have a similar number 1FECT. Awe is the feeling of being faced with something vast and beyond our current understanding of things. We can experience awe in the presence of beauty, the natural world and exceptional ability. Those moments that force us to reevaluate and rethink things in order to accommodate this new experience. From coming face to face with a powerful and charismatic leader, to gazing at the night sky and contemplating the universe and the chances of having even been born. Some experiences of awe come in once in a lifetime experiences, like witnessing the birth of a child. Others can be connected with more frequently. Perhaps a walk through the woods, looking out to sea or listening to a powerful singer. Psychology research has neglected this area so far, but we see AI used by people to detach from the messy details of everyday life and to widen the focus from the small stew, number 1F, to the wider world and something that feels vastly bigger. But since the birth of the field of positive psychology, the research is starting to acknowledge the importance of positive emotions and not just the erratic. But since the birth of the field of positive psychology, the research is starting to acknowledge the importance of positive emotions and not just the eradication of the negative ones. Fredrickson, 2003. There is some relationship here between awe and gratitude, but so far any empirical evidence is lacking. In hearing people talk about their experiences of awe, I hear people talking about feeling small, and in doing so, being able to recognize more easily what number 2D ers most. It appears to bring about gratitude and a wonder for having the chance to be alive. And it doesn't require you to live on a beach in Thailand or have access to Niagara Falls. It can be felt with a focus on ideas and imagery. Many self-help gurus and motivational speakers talk about how the chances of being born are 1 in 400 trillion. This idea is hard to even comprehend and forces us to spend time trying to acknowledge how fortunate we must be to have this chance to live, even for a short time. Those ideas trigger a sense of awe and the something bigger than me feeling. There is nothing like feeling small in a vast universe to bring your stress down and feel comforted by the new perspective. In trying to accommodate that in your mind, everything needs a reshoot. Number 25, and you get a slightly fresh perspective on whatever you feel consumed by. So, when dealing with stress, why not explore what triggers a sense of awe for you, whether it is time with animals or nature, watching extraordinary performances or looking up at the stars. It helps to document these experiences, perhaps through journaling, so that you can understand the number 1F ECT on you and then later return to memories even if you cannot return to the place. Chapter Summary. Changing something as simple as how you breathe will impact on your stress levels. Science is showing us that meditation has a significant number 1F ECT on the brain and how we deal with stress. Connecting with others helps us to recover from stress. Social isolation puts the mind and body under great stress. Goals founded in contribution rather than competition helps us to stay motivated and persevere under stress. Seek out experiences of Adashi, number 2C, your perspective. Chapter 31. Coping when it counts. We are so bombarded with information about how stress is bad that most interventions focus on GE, number 2D, getting rid of stressors and adding in more rest and relaxation. But what does that mean for the non-negotiable events that cause stress? How do you face the surge in stress as you walk into a job interview or exam? How do we deal with those moments and stay on our game? When you are faced with a high-pressure situation, all the wonderful research on how to relax and de-stress starts to feel less helpful. You cannot rush out, number 1F, to engage in a deep relaxation exercise as your exam begins, and vowing to be less perfectionist as you enter the only job interview you've managed to get in months is not going to make you any less stressed. In these situations, what we really need are some clear tools for how to use the stress to help us perform and even learn from that experience. We need to know how to actively cope with the demands of those non-negotiable high-pressure situations. If there are times when stress works to our advantage, it is in these high-pressure, short-term situations, and so the goal is not to eliminate that stress and stroll into the interview as relaxed as you feel at home on the sofa. Instead, the key is to use the benefits of the pressure without let number 2D ing it overwhelm you and have a detrimental number 1F ECT on your performance. Mindset, your new relationship with stress. Research shows that how we think about our stress at number 1F ECTs how we perform under pressure. A sheet number 2C, from perceiving the stress response as a problem to viewing it as an asset that will help frees up those individuals to spend less energy trying to squash the feelings and instead focus on meeting whatever demands they face. As a result, they tend to feel less worried about the stress, feel more confident and perform number 2D This mindset sheet number 2C can be the subtle number 1F errands between. Despite how stressful it is, try your best to, when you feel the signs of stress, channel that energy and enhanced focus to do your best. There is also evidence that doing this helps us to feel less exhausted by the stress. Strachan A. Staves, 2014. When we focus our number 1F efforts purely on reducing stress in the build-up to a big event, whatever it may be, we are reinforcing the misconception that stress is a problem to be solved. When you are trying to get somewhere and stress rears its head, take it with you. Let it help you to focus and energize and move with accuracy. You are built to perform under pressure, and that is exactly what you will do. Reminding yourself of this changes the meaning of those signs of stress that might otherwise be seen as symptoms of a problem. In fact, research shows that simply reminding someone that their performance improves under pressure improves their actual performance by 33%. Jameson et al., 2018. Bad language. One way to change our mindset is in our use of language. The words we use can powerfully determine the meaning of a situation and our approach to it. Imagine you were a professional athlete and just before you let number 2C, the locker room to compete, your coach said, "You're about to blow it." Not only would your stress increase, but your subsequent thoughts are likely to sound like catastrophizing thoughts that turn that stress into something that feels like panic. Social media is awash with daily at number 22 armations and quotes, some of which may happen to hit home if they reach the right person at the right time. But what number 1F errands can they make? Some of them focus on what to stop doing or sweeping statements about what to avoid in life. There is a big problem with focusing in at number 22 armation on what not to do. We only have the one spotlight of at number 2D engine, and when we focus it on what not to do, that leaves number 2D room to focus on what we do need to do for things to go well. Others focus on being purely positive. These can be UPLI number 2C ing, but only if you believe in them. Simply being told to stay positive, or you're doing great, is vague at best and number 1F or is no clear guidance on how to move through the challenge ahead of you. Dr. Dave Allred is an elite performance coach who works with many of the world's top athletes, helping them to perform at their highest level under extreme and very public pressure. When he puts together a number 22 R-machines for his athletes, he makes sure those at number 22 R-machines steer away from sweeping absolutes and remain concrete and factual, something the player believes. They clearly identify the key to the necessary mindset and remind them that keeping to the process will lead to improvement. When statements make it clear what needs to be focused on, they give us direction. Allred 2016 suggests starting with a how to statement, then vividly describing what happens when the process is right, and thirdly conjuring up the emotional state that matches your intention. When stress is high and threatens to disrupt our concentration or ability to perform, we can prepare statements like those in advance to help us match our thoughts, feelings and actions to our intentions. The type of demands you face will change the type of statements you need. The key is to keep them short, concrete, specific and instructional, and for them to put you in touch with the feeling of the process that you may have practiced before the event. Reframing. We have covered reframing in other sections of this book, but it is also especially helpful here. Reframing is using the power of language or imagery to adjust the way you perceive a situation. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything that you don't believe could be true. You are simply trying to sheet number 2C, your frame of reference. Looking at things from a new perspective can enable us to draw new meaning from the experience and, in doing so, sheet number 2C, our emotional state. In the section on fear we talked about reframing anxiety to excitement. In this case, we can reframe the sensations of stress to the feeling of determination, or threat into challenge. Changing just these single words transforms that meaning without telling any lies about the reality of the physical sensations we face. With the let number 2D words, we are choosing to embrace those feelings. With the former, we find them aversive and push them away. Focus. In high-stress situations we tend to get tunnel vision. This is supposed to happen, as it helps us to focus on the most important demands. But if the sensations of that stress feel overwhelming, there is something that we can do to allow the body to maintain that high output while calming the mind. Ongoing research into this suggests that choosing to sheet number 2C from that tunnel vision back to a more panoramic view calms the mind. This does not mean moving your head to look all around you, but just allowing your gaze to widen and take in more of your surroundings. The visual system is part of the autonomic nervous system, and so dilating your gaze in this way accesses circuits in the brain associated with stress and levels of alertness. Huberman 2021 describes how this is a powerful technique for GE number 2D, being more comfortable with higher levels of activation. We don't want the stress response to stop because we number 2C and need it in high pressure situations. We just want our mind to be more okay with it, raising our stress threshold. Failure. When the pressure is on, it's number 2C and because the stakes are high. We believe that failure has big implications. This makes sense. When failure is interpreted as a big threat, the brain wants to focus on that threat to be sure we avoid it. For those who tend to self at number 2D, act at number 2C, or any failure, big or small, any signs of potential failure will likely lead to a spike in the stress response. We all have a limited capacity for a number 2D engine, and when we need to perform under stressful conditions we need to take full control of that spotlight and focus on what is going to help us face the challenge. To overcome that fear of failure in the moment and that preoccupation with everything that could go wrong, we need to immerse ourselves in a narrow focus on the process, leaving no space for worrying thoughts about potential outcomes. This is where it can help to practice ahead of time, if it is possible given the situation. In building a familiarity with the process and how it feels to walk through it, you can pre-prepare those guiding statements that will remind you of what to focus on and expect if you need that on the day. If your process becomes a well-trodden path, you get the chance to build trust in that process. Depending on the challenges that we face and the realities of failure, we can use the same skill of reframing to change our perception of failure. Try this. If you want to explore this subject with journaling, here are a few prompts to help guide you. How do you respond to your own failures? Do you deny them and quickly move on? Forged number 2D, ing it ever happened. Do you immediately start on the self at number 2D act, name calling and blaming something in your character? Or do you look outward and start blaming the world for making life so hard for you? If there is something that we don't get taught about enough, it is how to cope with failure. When we believe that mistakes and setbacks are linked to who we are as a person and our self-worth, then even the smallest of failures will trigger shame and the urge to give up, withdraw, hide away and block out the excruciating feelings. This happens a lot for perfectionists. There is a focus on being enough in the eyes of others and assuming that those others demand nothing less than perfection. If I fail then I am a failure. If I lose then I am a loser. However small and temporary that setback may have been. But when we respond to failure without these global at number 2D acts on our personality and instead focus on the specifics of the moment, holding our awareness that imperfection is an intrinsic part of our common humanity, the emotional result is deep number 1F errant. Feeling guilty about an error in judgment or a choice made allows us to be honest with ourselves about where we went wrong without feeling doomed to being a failure forever. It focuses on the specific behavior rather than at number 2D acting as a person. Crucially, you still take accountability for your actions. Self-compassion is not let number 2D ing yourself number 1F the hook constantly. It is focusing on the specific mistake as an isolated event so that you are free to learn from it and sheet number 2C direction back towards your values. This is the path to continuing to improve and moving on from mistakes. Shame, on the other hand, immobilizes and paralyzes us. Failure is always D number 22 Cullen heightens our stress response. In times of stress our negative core beliefs can become activated, Osmo et al., 2018. We start to entertain thoughts like, I am a loser, I am a complete failure, I am worthless, I am nothing. Those thoughts and the shame that accompanies them are very powerful in making us feel completely alone and isolated. We buy into those thoughts as facts. We think we are the only ones and so we hide how we feel. But as it turns out, among the 7 billion people on this earth, these sorts of core beliefs are part of a list of just 5, number 2 C, or 20 common negative core beliefs that are seen across the world. Essentially this means that we are the opposite of alone. As human beings, the need to feel worthy of love and to have a safe group in which we belong is in us all. When we feel shame around failure we can feel as if our acceptance and therefore our survival is under threat. It is an all-consuming sensation that can stop us even trying to fix things because we believe that the problem is us, rather than a specific behavior or choice. When we are going out into the world and taking risks, making ourselves vulnerable to shame, we need the skills to manage that shame and move through it. We all need a safe place to return to that allows us to learn from failure without our worthiness as a human being coming into question. That place has to be our own mind. When someone we love is Sue, number 1 F earring, we show them kindness because we know it is what they need. When we take a fall, it is time to do that for ourselves. It is the surest way of ensuring we get back up and move forward. But how do we become less hostile to ourselves and become instead the voice we need to hear? Shame resilience. When we feel shame in response to a failure there is a number 2 C and a huge thought bias involved. We take one event, action, choice, or even a number 2 D, earn of behavior and we use it to make a global statement about who we are and our worth as a person. This makes a judgment on the whole person using only this specific information, neglecting every other layer of your strengths, weaknesses and intentions. This is something we wouldn't do to someone we love. If someone you love unconditionally made a mistake, you wouldn't want them to write themselves out, number 1 F, as a person. You would want them to learn from the experience and move forward, making choices that were more in line with who they wanted to be. You would still want the best for them and so you would not subject them to a barrage of verbal abuse. Toolkit, building shame resilience. Shame can be intense and extremely painful. Here is a list of tips for building resilience to the shame associated with setbacks and failure. Be vigilant about your choice of language. I am statements lead into those global at number 2 D, acts on character and your worth as a person that feed and re-trigger the shame. When reflecting on what happened, stay very specific to the behavior that you considered to be a mistake. One behavior or set of behaviors is not the whole you. Acknowledge that you are not alone in feeling this way. At number 2 C, or a failure or setback, it is normal for most humans to become vulnerable to feelings of shame and to focus on thoughts of self-loathing. Those thoughts are seen across the world but are not necessarily helpful or accurate. Acknowledge that this feeling, while painful and intense, is also temporary. We can use self-soothing skills, see section 3, page 109, to help us ride the wave of the emotion. How would you speak to someone you love who is in this scenario? How would you show them you love them while also being honest and enabling them to be accountable for their actions? Talk to someone you know and trust. Concealing shame keeps it going. Sharing it helps us to recognize the common human experience of shame at number 2 C, or failure. Good friends can also help us to stay accountable for our mistakes because we trust them to be honest with us, while continuing to accept us throughout. What response to this situation most fits with the kind of person you want to be? How could you move forward from now in a way that you would be proud of and grateful for when you look back on this time? Chapter summary. How we think about stress. Number 1 F, ECTS, how we perform under pressure. Seeing stress as an asset that will help you enables you to spend less energy trying to squash the feelings and instead focus on the demands you face. Keep performance at number 22. Affirmations are mantras focused on what to do, rather than what not to do. Adjust your focus to adjust your stress levels. Work on your relationship to failure and building shame resilience to help you deal with stress in high-pressure situations. Chapter 32. The problem with, I just want to be happy. In therapy, when we start to shine a light on the way forward and think about what we want, it's not uncommon to hear, I just want to be happy. But the idea of happiness has been hijacked over the years by an elusive fairy tale of constant pleasure and satisfaction with life. You don't have to look far on social media to come across a wave of posts telling you to be positive, stay happy, eliminate negativity from your life. We are given the impression that happiness is the norm and anything outside of that could be a mental health problem. We are also sold the idea that if we can achieve material wealth, happiness will arrive and stick around. But humans are not built to be in a constant happy state. We are built to respond to the challenges of survival. Emotions are a reflection of our physical state, our actions, beliefs and what is going on around us. All of those things are constantly changing. Therefore, a normal state is one that constantly changes too. In his book The Happiness Trap, Russ Harris explains how emotions are like the weather. They are constantly moving and changing, sometimes predictably, sometimes suddenly and unexpectedly. Emotions are always a part of our experience. But, just like the weather, some moments are pleasant and others are hard to endure. At other times, there is nothing distinct enough for us to easily describe. When we recognize the nature of human experience in this way, it becomes clear that anything being sold to us with the promise of happily ever at number 2 C or cannot live up to its promise if happy means the absence of any of the less pleasant emotions. We can live a happy and fulfilling life and still experience the full range of emotions that comes along with being human. Buying into the idea that happiness means constant positivity can leave us believing we have failed when we feel down. We feel like we are number 2 D, ing something wrong, or we feel afraid that we may have a mental health problem. Thinking in that way then makes that dark cloudy day even darker. Sometimes we are not happy because we are human and life is number 22, cold a lot of the time. Things that bring us the most happiness in our lives bring much more than happy feelings. The best example is the people in our lives. Your family, who mean the world to you, may upset you the most when they get things wrong. Parents feel a profound sense of meaning in their roles and intense feelings of love and joy. But they also feel great pain and fear and shame at times too. So happy moments are just one flower in a very large bouquet. You can't have one without the other. Emotions come as a whole bunch. Why meaning matters. Some people start therapy because they feel lost in life. They can't put their finger on a specific problem, but they know they don't feel right. It's hard to get excited about anything or apply themselves to tasks with any real energy or enthusiasm. Without a clear and specific problem, they find it hard to problem solve and work out which direction to take. It's not so much that they are struggling to achieve their goals. They are not sure which goals to set in the first place, and whether any of them feel worth it. In many cases, this is associated with a disconnect from core values. Life has pulled them away from what number 2D matters most to them. Working to get real clarity on your values can do a number of things. It can give a guide on the direction you want to head in, an idea of the types of goals that will be most fulfilling and purposeful. It can help you to persevere through painful points in life and, crucially, to remind yourself that even when times are hard, you are on the right path. What are values? Values are not the same as goals. A goal is a concrete, finite thing that you can work towards. Once you achieve it, that is the end point. Then you have to look for the next goal. A goal might be passing an exam, ticking everything number 1 your to-do list, or running a personal best. Values are not a set of actions that can be completed. Values are a set of ideas about how you want to live your life, the kind of person you want to be and the principles you want to stand for. If life was one complete journey, then a value would be the path you choose to follow. The path never comes to an end. It is one possible way of making your journey, and living in line with your values is the conscious number 1 effort you make to always stay close to that path. The path is full of hurdles you have to jump over along the way. These are the goals you commit to when you choose this path. Some hurdles may be large and you're not even sure if you can get over them. But you give it your best shot because staying on this path is so important to you. There are plenty of other paths with other hurdles and challenges, but choosing to stick to this one and tackle whatever comes along gives all those events and actions meaning and purpose. It is the intention of choosing this path that enables you to push through barriers that you might never have tried otherwise. So you may work hard to pass lots of exams in your lifetime, because one of your values might be lifelong learning and personal growth. Values are the things you do, the number 2D attitude you do them with and why you choose to do them. They are not who you are and who you are not. They are not something you have or become or achieve or complete. Sometimes we dry number 2C away from living in line with our values. That might be because life happens and we get pulled in number 1 errant directions. Or it can be because we didn't have a clear sense of what our own values were. As we mature and develop throughout our life, our values may change too. We develop independence and move away from home, we learn from the people we encounter, learn more about the world, maybe have children, maybe don't. The list goes on. For all of these reasons, it is a valuable practice to engage in regular evaluation of what number 2D matters most. That way, we can make conscious decisions to redirect if we need to and ensure we stay close to that path so that life can feel meaningful. When we don't have clarity on our values, we can set goals based on what we think we should be doing, others' expectations, or a guess that once we achieve that goal, we will finally be enough, we can finally relax and be happy with who we are. One major flaw with that is it puts rigid parameters around the conditions in which you can be content and happy. It also places life satisfaction and happiness all in the future. Clear, 2018. I am not suggesting that you should never set yourself goals. But when you work towards something, it helps to be clear on why you are working towards it and to recognize that all the good in life is not waiting at the end point of goals, but in the process we go through along the way. Rather than hoping things are number 2D in the future, what if life could be meaningful and purposeful now, by living in line with what number 2D matters most to you? You still get to strive towards change and achievement with all your strength, but you are not waiting for a meaningful life, you already have it. Chapter Summary. We are number 2C and sold the idea that happiness is the norm and anything outside of that could be a mental health problem. Sometimes we are not happy because we are human and life is number 22 cult. Things that make life worthwhile bring us more than just happy feelings. They bring us a mix of happiness, love, joy, fear, shame and hurt at times too. Number 2D in clarity on our personal values can guide us on number 2D in goals that will bring meaning and purpose. Keeping our values front and center also helps us to persevere through painful points in life knowing we're on the right path. Chapter 33. Working out what matters. There are some simple exercises you can do to get some clarity on your values as they are today. It's worth noting that values change over time depending on our stage in life and what we are facing. Not only do our values change but so do our actions and their alignment to those values. Life happens, and when we face change or struggle, we can be pulled in a new direction away from what number 2D matters. So it's helpful to make time for a values check-in every now and then to re-evaluate. It's a way of checking the compass and the map at the same time. Which way am I heading? Do I want to be going in this direction? If not, how can I adjust my direction to head back towards what number 2D matters most to me? Figure 10. Values. Circle the values that feel relevant and important to you. Figure 11. This chart gives a couple of examples of the distinction between values and goals that may be in line with those values and how that may translate into everyday actions. Figure 11. This chart gives a couple of examples of the distinction between values and goals that may be in line with those values and how that may translate into everyday actions. Values, goals, day-to-day behaviors. Lifelong learning, curiosity, personal growth. Educational courses. Reading, studying, challenging self with. Exams are. Performances that. Push and expand. Those skills and. Promote learning. Love and compassion for others. To remember special dates for loved ones, to visit relatives at certain times. Expressing love and compassion in small ways every day. Writing down dates of birthdays and anniversaries. Making time to spend with loved ones. Helping an elderly neighbor across the road. Toolkit, the values check-in. In the spare tools section at the back of the book, you'll find a blank grid that you can use to reflect on what you value most in each area of your life. The examples listed in these boxes are just starting points. You do not have to follow these exact ones. Feel free to change them for values and goals that most fit for you. In each box, try to reflect on what values are most important to you in this area of your life. Here's a list of prompts that can help. What kind of person would you most like to be in this area of your life? What do you want to stand for? What do you want your number 1 efforts to represent? What contribution do you want to make? What qualities or number 2 do you want to bring to this area of your life? Relationships, health, creativity, parenting, spirituality, faith, contribution. Learning and development, play, leisure, work. The key part of this exercise comes at number 2C, or you have listed your values in each box. In ACT therapy, we ask individuals to rate how important each set of values are to them on a scale of 0 to 10. On this scale, 10 would be of the highest importance and 0 not at all. We then ask people to rate how closely they feel they are living in line with those values on the same scale, 10 being highly in line with the value and 0 being not at all. We then spend time looking at the number 1 errance between the rating of importance and the rating of how closely they are living in line with it. If that number 1 errance is large, then it can indicate that you have been pulled away from living in line with what number 2 ers most to you. For example, if you identify that looking at number 2C your health and looking at number 2C your body is of the highest importance to you at 10 out of 10, but you rate how much you are living in line with that as just 2 out of 10 because you have been eating poorly and stopped exercising, then that gives you a prompt to look at making some positive changes in that area of your life. All this does is give you an indication of areas of your life to turn towards. It is a great way to get a bird's eye view of the sometimes competing priorities in our lives. It doesn't dictate what we should do or how to do it. It just number 1 ers us a map, an overview of things as they are now. From there, we get to choose what action we take to bring ourselves closer to the path that we want to be on. Crucially, this exercise is not about all the problems we face and the pleasant or painful emotions we encounter each day. It is about the meaning we find in both the toughest and easiest days. It does not ask us to wait until everything is fine before we start living as the kind of person we want to be. It gets us thinking about how we can consciously choose to live by our values, whatever is going on around us. Once you have identified a few of the most important aspects of your life and your values in that area, you can use this simple exercise to check in and see how closely you're living in line with your values at the moment. The exercise was originally designed by a Swedish ACT therapist named Tobias Lundgren. This is my own adaptation that I like to use myself. The star shape has 6 measures, 1 on each point of the star. Label each measure with a domain of your life that is especially important to you. On the scale of 0 to 10, mark a cross that represents how much you are currently living in line with your values in this area. For example, you may feel that you haven't been prioritizing your health in the way that you'd like, so you give it a 5 out of 10. But in your relationships you might feel that you are living number 2 closely in line with the kind of partner you want to be, so you give that one a 9 out of 10. Once you have given them all a mark, you can draw lines to join the marks and see how your star takes shape. If the star is uneven, the shorter points are the areas that need your number 2 attention. You'll find blank values stars that you can fill in at the back of the book in the spare tools section. Figure 12, the values star. It can be easy to feel confused about how much our values represent our own wishes and how much they are dictated by the expectations of others. This is an important issue to clarify. It is not to say that our sense of duty or commitment to our family or community is not important or that we should not choose it. But working out what values are truly your own and which ones feel imposed can reveal why certain aspects of our life might feel less fulfilling or disconnected. Try this. Another way to do a more regular values check-in is to incorporate it into journaling or some simple self-reflection. Here are a few questions to help prompt that reflection. I like to use these both personally and with others in therapy when exploring values. Questions to explore. #DF. If you were to look back on this next chapter of your life and feel proud and content with how you faced life's challenges, how would you be approaching daily life? What would the next chapter look like? In your answer, try to focus on your own choices, actions and at number 2 attitude, not other people or events that are out of your control. Try to consider how you would approach life, whatever happens. #E0. What do you want to stand for in your relationship with yourself, your health and personal growth? What is important to you about these? #E1. What kind of person do you want to be for the people in your life? How do you want to interact with them and contribute to their lives? #E2. How do you want the people in your life to feel when you are around? What do you want to represent in your circle of friends and family? #E3. If you only get to live once, what impact do you want to have? While you are here. #E4. If no one knew how you spent your time, would you still be doing this? #E5. As you move forward through this day or this week, what is one value that you will try to bring to each choice and action? Examples here might be, today I choose to bring enthusiasm, courage, compassion, curiosity to each experience, choice and action. I will do this by. Chapter summary. There are some simple exercises you can do to get some clarity on your values as they are today. Values can change over time and how much we live in line with them can change. So it helps to do a regular values check-in. When we use our values to guide our goals, say, number 2D, it also helps to create our day-to-day purpose. The focus is not on what you want to happen for you but on the kind of person you want to be, the contribution you want to make in the number 2D attitude you want to face life with, no matter number 2D or what happens. Chapter 34. How to create a life with meaning. So what happens when you work out what is important and realize you are not living in line with those values? How do you begin to move in that direction? When we decide it's time for a change, there can be a tendency to come up with a huge, radical new goal. For example, let's say you do your values check-in and decide you need to start looking at number 2C or your health by exercising. In the next moment, you start coming up with new goals. Maybe you'll run a marathon or improve your nutritional intake. But simply having goals is not going to ensure that your life changes and stays changed. What does that is the everyday details of your repeated behaviors that keep you moving forward in that direction. Your goal might be to complete a marathon. But marathon or no marathon, the life-changing part comes from the things you put in place to help you get out running every day, the running group you join to keep you going, the ways in which you gradually increase the distances you cover and the changes you make to your nutritional intake to help. Say, number 2D, a goal can help to give you that initial push in the right direction. But it is important to remember that the endpoint of the goal, its completion, is actually a limitation. If you have reassessed your values and you want to move in a new direction based on what number 2D is most to you in your life, then you are likely to want to continue in that direction. Many people run a marathon and hang up their running shoes shortly at number 2C. The values check-ins are useful to do on a regular basis because the details of your values may change over time. But it also gives you the chance to focus on the intricate details of the everyday number 2D number 2D of how you are living. We get to ask ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be today? And, what am I going to do today to step in that direction? If your identity is going to be the kind of person who looks at number 2C or their health every day, then it has potential to last long at number 2C or the marathon has come and gone. Working in this way is a two-pronged at number 2D act. By spending time thinking about and visualizing the person you intend to be and turning those ideas into concrete, sustainable actions, you can begin to change how meaningful those number 1 efforts will feel. Change is hard, so having a solid anchor in your clarity about why, and a permanent sense of identity, because this is who I am now, helps you to persist when that change inevitably meets resistance from your own mind or the people around you. Over time, once those new ways of thinking and behaving establish themselves, your beliefs about yourself can begin to sheet number 2C too. So you genuinely become someone who prioritizes health and fitness, not by the initial goal of running a marathon, but by persisting with a new lifestyle. Exercise becomes something you do because you identify with it, not because there is a goal to reach. The initial marathon idea almost becomes irrelevant. Overly focusing on outcome can lead us to quit more easily when we don't see results quickly enough or when we meet resistance and hurdles along the way. When you first decide to set a goal, you might get excited about it and a spark of motivation will strike. But motivation is like a flame on a match. It will burn itself out. It's an unsustainable source of fuel. But if you have a routine of small actions that are not too radical or dramatic to maintain, then your new sense of identity will help to sustain you. Chapter summary. When we decide it's time for a change, there can be a tendency to come up with a huge radical new goal. Simply having a goal is not enough to ensure your life changes and stays changed. Spending time thinking about and visualizing the person you intend to be, and turning those ideas into concrete, sustainable actions, can change how meaningful those number 1 efforts feel. Linking your intentions to your sense of identity allows the new behaviors to continue way beyond the initial goal. Chapter 35. Relationships. We cannot talk about a life of meaning without talking about relationships. Our relationships are what make us human. When it comes to living a happy life, relationships trump money, fame, social class, genes and all the things we are told to strive for first and foremost. Our relationships and how happy we are in them are not separate from our overall health. They are at the core of the equation. Healthy relationships protect both our physical and mental health over the course of our lives. Waldinger, 2015. This does not just mean life partners and marriage, but all our relationships. Those with friends, family, children and our community. This comes up in both the scientific data on various health measures and biological indicators, but also in the narratives of real people. Among the top 5 regrets of the dying is, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Where, 2012. But for something so profoundly defining about who we are and how we live our lives, and something so powerful in its impact on how long and how happily we live, we are all at number 2C guessing as to what we should be doing to make our relationships healthy. Nobody hands us a manual. We start connecting with others and learning from those experiences from the moment we are born. We build up templates for relationships from the very first relationships we have, with parents, siblings, extended family members and peers. We have to learn these lessons at our most vulnerable age, when we cannot choose our relationships but are wholly dependent on them for our survival. Those number 2D earns of behavior that we learn to use early in life to manage our relationships can sometimes prove much less helpful to us in our adult relationships. But, given that relationships are so crucial to a long and happy life, how can we start, even as adults, to work out how to improve them? Insights from both individual therapy and couples therapy can help us with this. Cognitive Analytic Therapy, CAT, is a therapy that acknowledges the relationship number 2D earns that we develop early in life and how those play out in our adult relationships. For those able to access CAT, it can be a revealing process to map out the roles you tend to find yourself playing in relationships and the cycles you feel stuck in. But for those of us who cannot access a therapy like CAT, what can we do to be number 2D or understand our relationships and work on improving them? First, it is important to point out some of the myths we are led to believe by popular culture that can leave us feeling that we are number 2D-ing things seriously wrong. Most of these myths stand for both intimate relationships and others with friends and family. Relationship myths. Love shouldn't be hard. The idea that if someone